AI initiative managed by and coordinated by Architect. And then I have some recommendations for companies, but also for politics that give the framing for the success of AI also here. But let me start to give a bit of a perspective. You know, AI has been initiated almost 17 years ago in 1956 at a conference in Dartmouth, and you wonder why now, by a sudden, AI is now really in a hype phase, and in between there were a lot of valley of tears and dissatisfaction. And this figure here gives you the clear explanation why we now have the breakthrough of AI and why AI is such an important topic. So let's just take the technology that you need to run an autonomous car. You see that on the right side what you all need. And yeah, 20 years ago, you would have needed almost 50 million, and you would have needed 170 square meters of space to bring all the technology together. And now the costs have dramatically improved, and the space need has been shrinking down also dramatically, so that now the technology costs just $600, and the space need is just one piece of paper from the size. So that means technology has improved, and with that things that had been impossible before are now possible, and now it's the right time to make the momentum. And the momentum is has been started, and now you see here 4 areas of AI that are also important for healthcare applications. It's about where the forefront is about that the software becomes a personal assistant, also with smart devices, and that voice recognition has made such a progress. And also the computer vision has been very much improved. We will see some examples. And this is very much needed also for self-driving cars, but also for real-time medicine that serves also medical treatments in a real-time way. And that's why also pattern recognition is so crucial to determine the clinical diagnosis, as said, ideally also in real time, and give recommendations. I think we are on a good track from a research perspective, but there need to be further adoption also in the reality. One aspect that in industrial AI is very crucial in these days is that the intelligence is more and more coming to the edge. The edge is the last mile to the user, meaning devices. And you probably know the discussion about the hyperscalers, all these big tech players with their cloud infrastructure. And we see that more and more intelligence is decentralized, and AI is placed into the devices that become smarter and smarter. And that has clearly some advantage because you have no latency. You have probably also less or no hassle with the data privacy because you don't accumulate data, you just process it and then give it back. You also have no cost or little cost for the transfer of data, which is a very costly thing. So that edge computing becomes really popular, and edge AI also. And there were some also research studies saying that the AI results were almost the same, or not so much weaker than if the processing would have been essentially done, which sometimes is difficult. So that is clearly a big topic in industrial AI, but I believe that is also relevant for healthcare and especially for medtech, which is also a big sector in Germany, but also around Lübeck with Träger. Another big topic is about that the current AI algorithms, which provide a high accuracy and success of the results, were criticized because of the lack of explainability. And on the other side, where explainability is better, the models are not as good as the other ones. So now a discipline is coming up to shape explainable AI, which is supposed to be the ideal compromise of precision and best results of AI, and on the other side, explainability. Because when you deal with people want to understand whether the results are can be trusted or not, and that is especially true when it's about very critical applications in which is the case in healthcare, which is the case in autonomous driving. You clearly don't need that if you place an advertisement, a personalized advertisement on a website, then you don't need to know how that came through. But in some critical applications, to get the trust of the decision makers, it's key to have explanations. And that's why this is a big topic, which is also relevant for healthcare. Now, where are we in Germany? You have heard about the discussion that, especially with the Corona lockdown, that Germany is behind in digital. And you see some numbers here, which show that this need to be a bit more looked in a precise way, because when you look at papers, I mean scientific publications, Europe is leading, with Germany also having a big portion of the publications, together with UK and France. Clearly, the talent pool is much smaller, although there were more and more professors and lectures about AI. But the biggest difference or gap is around AI companies, new companies that adopt AI, or existing companies that also invest in AI and build new use cases. There, Europe is clearly behind, and you see here that also China has a clear AI strategy and puts a lot of focus, and even is in terms of investments and patent applications is leading, while Europe is clearly behind. And that is why also the government has put the German AI initiative in place to catch up, but also to give the companies support to make their way. And this is also an initiative that works together with European partners to make sure that we are stronger in a whole in Europe. The AI initiative, we have a website where you also can see examples, because to convince people, it's also important to say, yeah, it's also for my industry, it's also for my domain. And you see here 600 examples that have been collected, and that were across whole Germany. Clearly some focus areas naturally where the big institutes for AI are, because there's still, I would say, half of the examples are still coming from the academic part, but there is also a momentum in the startup scene and with companies. But it can be more, of course, and that's why we are also here to promote the topic. Highlight in our industry calculation are cases in healthcare and pharma. You see a lot of activities from academia, but also from companies that very actively are involved in the initiative, especially in the work stream about AI applications in healthcare. We come to that. There are also some very nice other examples from industrial AI that I want to bring to your attention, because they show what is possible and what is also possible in Germany. And one example is Konux. Konux is a Munich-based startup created out of the TU Munich that has worked together with the Deutsche Bahn, the German railway, to detect anomalies in the train infrastructure. And you see here the sensors, and the sensors basically give a tracking where there are anomalies and where the repair troops, the field services has to be triggered in order to do a repair, ideally proactive, so that the infrastructure works with the highest possible availability. And that is currently rolled out. And you can imagine that especially when there are high temperatures, a lot of anomalies could happen, and that need to be detected really early on to provide a high availability. And imagine the thousands of kilometers of railway distances. I think this is really showing that this is a massive application that we see here. Another nice example is one that is a bit older, but is still a lighthouse case, is what KSR compressors have done. So they basically have put sensors in their compressors, and several dozens of sensors, and they detect at each part of the compressor whether there could be a break, and they give this information to a central processing, so that it can be determined when to replace the parts, and also when to send the field technicians to do the repair and replacement. And because of that, the KSR can not only do predictive maintenance, they can provide their equipment as a service, which with a certain service level, and that makes them unique in the competition, because the competition just sells compressors but without a service level, and with that they make themselves unique. And I think that is also leading the way how the equipment as a service, how a medtech can be provisioned to customers. And the advantage also of that is that you get an ongoing revenue stream that also helps you to sustain any kind of crisis, because you're not forced to sell machines by machines, but you have a constant revenue stream. For example, my old company, SAP, they have a predictable revenue stream of almost 70%, which helped them to be resilient versus any crisis. In order to really run AI, I would put your focus on data, because data, some people say it's the new oil. It's important that you understand your data assets. And these are, it's an example from the consumer industries. They have data assets to understand the customer, billing data, payment data, cookies, app movement data, feedbacks, surveys, all now available digital, complaints, and also they have information about their products, which are more and more also available in a digital way. And this data you would bring in a so-called data management platform. And this concept is not new. It's still a few years old. It's coming from the advertising technology space, where you store basically cookie information. But this is a very valid concept that can also be applied for the AI space, where you collect your own data, where you also share data with business partners, These are then your second-party data, the data from other parties that you get in exchange to share in a data privacy compliant with your own data. And then, of course, there are third-party data providers that where you can buy basically additional data. And these all data come into a data lake. It's important to understand that in the data lake, the data are stored with a data contract that explains for what usage the data are allowed, so that you can filter based on the consent by the user, if these are personal related data, for what you can really use the data. And then here is the data processing, and then the applications can use this for different use cases. I would strongly recommend to have a look at that concept, because it's leading also the way how AI infrastructures are built. And without data, AI makes no sense. It needs data, and you need to bring the data together in a data privacy compliant way. If you have that, and that is an example from the energy space, a startup called Fresh Energy, they basically process smart meter information from the utilities, and they can tell you whether the of your home, when you look at your different home appliances, what are the individual costs affected to the washing machine and the cleaning machine and other home appliance devices, and they can tell you whether you run that in a cost-efficient way, or whether you rather replace the apparel, or you do other energy-saving measures. And what they can do with that also is to track whether there is how many people are in the household, and they can also track whether there is, if you have an elderly person that needs intensive care, you can check whether the person is still active or not active, and if the person is not active, you could give an alarm maybe to the children that then go around and check whether the mother or the father is okay. And that is a very nice application to exploit data for new business models. And that's why I brought that also to you. Now let's look at healthcare. And I have this process here from prevention, diagnostic therapy, decision, and then therapy execution, and then the aftercare. And I have examples for all stages to give you a perspective what is all possible. Clearly, a lot of that is still in traditional business models, while also some are new offerings which also find their way with new business models. But let's have a look in the prevention of diseases. One example is the eye prognosis app that is helping you to detect whether you are going to get the Parkinson disease or you get the diabetes. And this app asks you questions, looks at your daily life, and then gives you recommendations about your food, your movement, and how to reduce weight in order to keep healthy. And that is also a research project that is supported by the EU. And another example when it comes to diagnostic, also in the Corona times, more and more the diagnosis apps become popular, where you can, with answering some questions, can find out what could be the disease that you have, and because they are checking the symptoms basically with a simple Q&A, and this is can be done with the app. You can also imagine that the Q&A you can do like with a chatbot, to find out what you have. It's not replacing a doctor, but it gives you the first indication, and maybe if you then are more confident that you are you have a disease, that you then go to the doctor. But this becomes very popular, and there are also a lot of startups also in the healthcare space now that go in that space. Another nice example when it comes to diagnostic is here from Siemens Healthineers, and I recently spoke with the software lead who is also in the German AI initiative, and he gave me some very good examples that you, based on MRT data and other data from the medtech machines of Siemens Healthineers, you can basically detect what is a heart, what is a kidney. You can really detect everything, and you can also detect whether there is a disease related to it. Even there is a research project ongoing that you in the radiology space, where you create doctors' reports automatically that then only need to be checked by the radiologist. But ultimately, he told me that in theory, the doctor here could be, the radiologist could be ultimately replaced by a machine, because at the moment the confidence level of the algorithms is so high that this is already possible. And there comes the topic of explainability. This is still in research, because it's still important that the doctors understand where the recommendation comes from, and understand that they can trust the recommendations. And but if you look 5-10 years from now, I believe this really becomes mainstream, especially in areas when we look beyond Germany. We look in the developing countries where you don't have that kind of specialists. Maybe you can bring the radiology machines there, but you can then have machines replacing the lacking specialists. Like the motivation in China is at the moment, who has not by far the level of specialists in the healthcare space, and that's why they also rely very much on AI. Another topic in that regard is our decision support systems that support the doctors, for example, to in the space of cancer, to identify carcinomes and other things, and give some explanations why they have detected this or other. You can imagine that, for example, this decision support could also be placed in as a mobile device to support the initial diagnosis, even when the emergency doctor comes. Another nice example that I have here is around how to help people who have an ongoing disease. And here you find also an example of the closed loop glucose system that helps you to steer basically your level. Or another example is that based on how you speak, an app could detect whether you are going in a depression. And that I have other examples seen where this can be easily analyzed even before somebody actively realizes this, and can then trigger counter actions. If you look at the topic of insulin, and you have a clear control loop here that could be applied with the devices of B. Braun and now the app. For example, in some cases, they have already put this closed loop into practice to leverage the time also of the care personnel to make an automated loop of the insulin treatment based on the level here. Another interesting example is, of course, to help people who need care, maybe also people who, because of an incident, lack of an arm, they can or have other problems, that they have a kind of an exoskeleton that help them to move where they could not move. And that has very much improved, even to the way that based on the electrical signals in the brain, you have some neuroimplantants that you then use to basically steer the exoskeleton, and with that your own robot, so that you can move independent and don't need a care person for that, which gives you, of course, a lot of freedom back that you had before the incident. And I think that is very noteworthy to mention, because that really helps to make life of people sustainable and help them going forward. Here you see another example from Otto Bock. This is a prosthesis of an arm, and that is that smart that it can be ultimately steered with some based on your thinking, and that is very noteworthy that that this works almost like a natural arm. If you look now a bit broader about, and we are in the topic of business models, here is the profit pool in healthcare, with the example of US, but I believe this can be also applied overall. You see that the digital space is very much growing with 15%, not only because of the health insurances paying, but also because of other insurances paying, because of the patients paying by themselves. If you see that the fitness market is very much exploded, and people see that the digital health market is growing by almost 20%, so it's noteworthy to see that there is a growing market to be exploited. And that's why venture capital is also going in that space. That's also why big tech is engaging very much in that space, also acquiring startups more and more. Even Google could generate or launch a next clinic, how that example shows here. But that's also why the German AI initiative brings the stakeholders together to make sure that we have a certain level of sovereignty in our space, and create own market leaders, or keep own market leaders in that space, and also provide support for the patients. Now let's come to the recommendations. In order to build a business model, and that is very crucial, that from the invention you come really to innovation, you have to answer the 4 dimensions of a business model. What is the value proposition for the customer and for the one that is ultimately paying? How does the value creation architecture look like? I mean, what is your internal structure? What are the resources that you need? in particular managing the data, processing the data, and your technical capabilities. But also it's important to understand your value creation network, meaning what are your business partners, what are maybe your research partners, and ultimately what is your business model, what is your packaging and pricing, how do you make money with that, and what is your business case, and is there a long-term perspective for profitable business. There is a lot detail behind that, and there are proven methods to develop new business models. For example, the business model canvas is probably very popular, and there are a lot of innovation coaches and consultants out there that you can leverage in order to build your own business model. We have also some recommendations here on our website of the German AI initiative, and we have made also an own report about how to practically build new business models to leverage the full potential of artificial intelligence. And it's not only about technology. Technology is one part. The other part is that in your company that you create a kind of a center of excellence to steer your internal initiatives, to also foster cross-functional collaboration, that you educate your people, including your management, and that you make sure that you have a data strategy, because without data, AI makes no sense, and that you create the right technological infrastructure also to do some focused experiments to learn in AI and to make your way. And clearly not all experiments are successful, but some are. And these who are successful help you to create good revenue streams. And I can only recommend you not to do everything by yourself, but to seek for partners, seek for help in the academia, seek for help with business partners, work with startups, even collaborate with former competitors, because in the digital space, your competitors are probably your partners, because nobody has enough data. But if you pool data, you can create a very good pool of data that helps you to exploit AI together and create a win-win. When it comes to the politics, there's a long list of things we also put in our report. 4 things I would put your attention to. Number 1 is that we desperately need the gigabit infrastructure, that we need 5G everywhere, and that and you probably have heard about Gaia X. You need data sovereignty. I can only recommend to put a multi-cloud strategy in place, not to be dependent from one hyperscaler, and to invest. The politics is investing now also in the next generation of cloud infrastructure, which will be quantum computing based. But there's a lot to do to catch up and to make sure that Germany and Europe is coming back into the leading group of countries. Another topic which is also
excuse me, we are getting beyond schedule, so maybe
just 1 minute. So
okay, that's
it also needs support for growth financing, and there are some regulations need to be adapted, but also there is the data privacy, the GDPR regulation. This need to be enhanced by a concrete code of conduct that give a guidance what are the best practices to be applied to be on the safe ground. And also the competition rule and legislation need to be adapted to make sure that also former competitors in the real world can work together and compete also against big tech, and also make sure that the startups have least bureaucracy to manage. And we brought that recommendations to the government, and we are confident that they hear us and work on it. And with that, I would like to conclude and thank you for the attention.
Yeah, thank you very much for your talk. It's